There is a particular kind of misery that intelligent, capable people fall into when they start dating someone new, and for a long time no one could explain it cleanly. A successful woman meets a charming man, and within weeks she has stopped eating properly, stopped seeing friends, and started arranging her whole life around whether or not her phone rings. A confident man dates a series of wonderful women and loses interest in each of them the moment things get serious, feeling trapped by the very closeness he thought he wanted. A wife of many years lies awake feeling completely alone next to a husband who will not talk. Amir Levine and Rachel Heller, in Attached, Are You Anxious, Avoidant, or Secure? How the Science of Adult Attachment Can Help You Find and Keep Love, argue that these are not three unique psychological puzzles requiring years of therapy to untangle. They are three predictable expressions of the same underlying mechanism, and once you can see it, you can never unsee it. That mechanism is adult attachment, and the central claim of this book is bracingly simple. Every adult approaches romantic intimacy from one of three basic stances: secure, anxious, or avoidant. And knowing which stance you occupy and which your partner occupies explains and predicts nearly everything about how the relationship will go. This is a summary of what the book teaches, offered as a guide to its ideas rather than a substitute for reading it. What follows tracks the author's own path, first establishing that the styles are real and biologically grounded, then teaching you to identify them in yourself and others, then walking through each style in depth, then diagnosing the most painful pairing of all, and finally handing over the concrete skills that secure people use without even thinking about them. Chapter 1: Decoding Relationship Behavior. The book opens not with theory, but with a friend. Levine and Heller describe watching their close friend Tamara fall for a man named Greg, a strikingly handsome charmer whose opening words carried an implicit promise of togetherness. "You don't have to be alone. Come work at my place. Call me any time." What Tamara did not hear, because she was guided by the common belief that love conquers all, was the second and contradictory message threaded through everything Greg said: that he had never sustained a stable relationship, that he always grew tired of women and needed to move on. She let love conquer her, certain that with her it would be different. It was not. As they grew closer, Greg's signals grew more erratic. He was suddenly too busy, could only meet on weekends, interspersed pushing her away with just enough affection to keep her from leaving. Tamara became anxious, hypersensitive, unable to concentrate at work, unwilling to make plans with friends in case he called. A resilient, accomplished woman had derailed into helplessness, and her friends, themselves trained clinicians, could not understand why. The answer arrived from an unexpected quarter. Amir was at the time working part-time in the therapeutic nursery at Columbia University, using attachment-guided therapy to help mothers build more secure bonds with their children, and the power of that work drove him deeper into attachment theory. There he encountered the research of Cindy Hazan and Philip Shaver, whose finding was that adults show patterns of attachment to their romantic partners that mirror the patterns children show toward their parents. The implication was electric. Amir called his longtime friend Rachel and asked her to help him translate a mountain of academic data into something ordinary people could actually use, and the book was born from that collaboration. The framework itself is the heart of the chapter. Adult attachment describes three main styles: the manners in which people perceive and respond to intimacy. Secure people are comfortable with closeness and are usually warm and loving. Anxious people crave intimacy, are preoccupied with their relationships, and worry about whether their partner truly loves them back. Avoidant people equate intimacy with a loss of independence and work constantly to minimize closeness. These styles show up not vaguely, but across specific, measurable dimensions. A person's view of togetherness, how they handle conflict, their attitude toward sex, their ability to communicate needs, and their expectations of a partner. The authors report the rough distribution the research has found. Just over half of people are secure, around 20% anxious, about 25% avoidant, and a small remainder in a rarer combined anxious-avoidant category. What makes the framework more than a personality quiz is its predictive precision. Returning to Tamara and Greg with attachment theory in hand, The authors found the research contained a prototype of Greg accurate to the last detail. His distancing, his fault-finding, his fights that undid every gain, his agony over saying, "I love you." Crucially, the theory explained that Greg pushed Tamara away, not because he found her lacking, as she assumed, but precisely because he felt closeness increasing. Tamara, too, was textbook. Her clinginess in the face of his distance, her inability to concentrate, her failure to leave even when she had resolved to. The theory revealed why two people who genuinely loved each other could not get along. They spoke two different attachment languages and inflamed each other's natural tendencies. The uncanny accuracy of that description is the book's opening argument that this is not one more vague psychological approach, but an evidence-based way to read behavior. Chapter 2. Dependency is not a bad word. If the first movement of the book establishes that the styles exist, this one attacks the cultural assumption that stands in the way of using them well. The belief that healthy adults should be emotionally self-sufficient. The authors open with a reality television couple, Karen and Tim, racing around the world. Karen kept needing Tim to hold her hand under pressure. Tim, valuing his independence, was reluctant. In the finale, Karen apologized for her own behavior. "I was too needy. That was silly. I should have kept my cool." While Tim said little. What both missed was that Tim had nearly quit the race in a fit of cold feet before a bungee jump, costing them their lead, and that Karen's steadiness might have carried him through had he let it. The authors use this to introduce the book's most counterintuitive engine, which they call the dependency paradox. The more effectively two people can depend on one another, the more independent and daring each becomes. Karen's premise that she should be able to soothe herself and control her own needs is, the authors argue, simply wrong. Getting attached means the brain becomes wired to seek a partner's proximity, and if the partner fails to reassure us, we are programmed to keep trying until they do. People in their formulation are only as needy as their unmet needs. When those needs are met, and the sooner the better, we turn our attention outward to the world. To show that this is biology and not preference, the authors reach back to the founders of attachment theory. Before John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth in the 1950s and 60s, psychology had no appreciation for the parent-child bond. A child's attachment to its mother was dismissed as a mere byproduct of feeding. The authors recall how far the pendulum had swung the other way in the earlier 20th century, citing John Broadus Watson's 1920s parenting manual, which warned against the dangers of too much mother love, and idealized a fearless, self-reliant child with no great attachments to any person or place. Bowlby's decisive observation was that infants whose nutritional needs were fully met, but who lacked an attachment figure, those raised in institutions or displaced by the Second World War, failed to develop normally, showing stunted physical, intellectual, and emotional growth. Attachment, it turned out, was as essential to survival as food and water. Mary Main later showed adults could be sorted into attachment categories by how they recalled their early bonds, and Hazan and Shaver demonstrated the same styles operate in adult romance, first using a love quiz published in the Rocky Mountain News, in which volunteers picked which of three statements best fit them. The three statements corresponding exactly to secure, avoidant, and anxious. From here, the authors take direct aim at what they call the codependency myth, the popular self-help wisdom, that your happiness must come from within, that your well-being is not your partner's responsibility and theirs is not yours, that needing your partner is a form of addiction to be corrected with better boundaries. Strikes them as a modern echo of Watson's happy child free of attachments. The codependency framework, they grant, is genuinely useful for families dealing with substance abuse. Its original purpose, but applied indiscriminately to all relationships, it becomes misleading and even damaging. The biological truth, they insist, runs the other way. Once we attach, we form a single physiological unit with our partner, who regulates our blood pressure, heart rate, breathing, and hormone levels. Dependency is a fact, not a choice. The evidence they marshal is concrete. A study by James Cone placed women in an MRI scanner under threat of mild electric shock. Holding a stranger's hand calmed the brain somewhat, but holding a husband's hand calmed it far more, and the effect was strongest for women in the most satisfying marriages. Brooke Feeney of Carnegie Mellon's Relationship Lab found that partners who felt supported when discussing their goals came away with higher self-esteem and greater confidence in achieving them, while those who felt their partner was intrusive or unsupportive actually downgraded their goals. Brian Baker, studying blood pressure at the University of Toronto, found the sharpest lesson of all. In a satisfying marriage, a partner's presence lowers blood pressure, but in an unsatisfying one, the same presence raises it and keeps it elevated. The partner we depend on is not a luxury or a weakness. They are a physiological regulator, and choosing the right person to depend on is therefore among the most consequential decisions a person makes. This is the foundation on which the rest of the book stands. The concepts of the secure base and the safe haven, the anchor we return to and the shelter we run to, borrowed from the study of children and applied without apology to adult love. Chapter 3. What is my attachment style? Having established that the styles are real and that dependency is not a defect, the authors turn practical and ask the reader to locate themselves. This chapter is built around a self-assessment, and rather than delivering conclusions, it hands over a diagnostic instrument, asking the reader to respond to a battery of statements and tally the results across the three categories. The point is not to produce a label to wear, but to give the reader a reliable starting map of their own relationship DNA, the specific way their attachment system tends to fire. The authors are careful about the question everyone immediately asks: where do these styles come from, and can they change? The early assumption in the field was that adult style was essentially inherited from infancy. Responsive parents produced secure adults, inconsistent parents produced anxious ones, distant and rigid parents produced avoidant ones. But the authors are clear that the science has moved past this tidy determinism. Adult attachment style is influenced by early caregiving, yes, but also by later life experiences, by significant relationships, and by deliberate work, which is precisely why a book aimed at changing the course of relationships can hope to accomplish anything at all. Styles are stable enough to be useful as a predictive tool and flexible enough to be worth working on. The chapter also softens the categories in an important way. Most people are not pure types, but sit somewhere on two underlying dimensions: how anxious they are about a partner's availability and how much they avoid closeness, with the named styles marking the regions of that space. This matters practically because a reader who does not perfectly match a single description is not thereby exempt from the framework. They are simply located between its poles. The instrument is designed to reveal that location honestly, and the authors insist the reader answer as they actually are, not as they wish to be, because the entire usefulness of everything that follows depends on an accurate self-reading. Chapter 4. Cracking the Code. What is my partner's style? If step 1 is reading yourself, step 2 is reading the person across the table, ideally early, before the heart has committed to someone incompatible. The authors are candid that this is harder than self-assessment because a new partner has every incentive, conscious or not, to present well, and because our own attachment system distorts our perception. So they supply tools. The most memorable is a set of what they call the 5 golden rules for deciphering attachment styles, heuristics for quickly placing a new partner when a formal assessment is impossible. The rules work by attending to specific tells. Does the person seek intimacy and closeness, or do they consistently deploy distancing strategies, emotional or physical, when things get warm? Do they make you feel comfortable or uncomfortable for asking where the relationship is headed? Are they preoccupied with the relationship and hungry for reassurance, or do they seem unbothered by your absence and quick to find fault? The authors teach that an avoidant partner will feel visibly uncomfortable with too much closeness and will pull back precisely when a secure or anxious partner would lean in, while an anxious partner will show hypervigilance to any sign of rejection. A secure partner, by contrast, communicates directly, puts their cards on the table about past relationships, and does not treat a question about commitment as a trap. The chapter also flags warning signs that are easy to romanticize. A partner who describes a mythic, effortless ideal of true love, the one person with whom everything will simply click, is, the author's caution, often signaling an avoidant pattern, because that fantasy of a flawless connection functions as a standing reason to find any real partner insufficient. Someone who speaks of a string of relationships that all mysteriously went stale is describing, in the author's reading, the recurring signature of avoidance rather than a run of bad luck. The practical payoff is protective. Armed with attachment principles, a person gains a reliable way to know who to trust and who to approach with caution, rather than discovering a fundamental mismatch only after months of emotional investment. Without these principles, the authors note, we simply do not know who to avoid. We are left interpreting mixed signals with nothing but hope. Chapter 5. Living with a Sixth Sense for Danger, the Anxious Attachment Style. Now the book slows down and enters each style from the inside, beginning with the anxious. The defining experience of anxious attachment is a finely tuned early warning system for anything that might threaten a bond. When the anxious person senses distance, a shorter text, a delayed call, a partner who seems preoccupied, their attachment system floods with what the authors, drawing on the integrative model of Philip Shaver and Mario Mikulincha, call activating strategies. These are the thoughts and feelings that compel the person to re-establish closeness. Obsessive attention to the partner, an inability to think about anything else, the conviction that this person is the only one who could make them happy, and a swelling sense of urgency that will not quiet until contact is restored. When activating strategies fail to produce reassurance, the anxious person escalates into what the authors term protest behavior, any action aimed at forcing the partner's attention back. This is where anxious attachment becomes self-defeating and visible from the outside. Protest behavior includes excessive attempts to re-establish contact, withdrawing and giving the silent treatment, keeping score, acting hostile, threatening to leave in the hope of being begged to stay, and making the partner feel guilty. The tragedy the authors draw out is that these behaviors are driven by a genuine and legitimate need for connection. Yet they reliably push away the very person whose closeness the anxious individual is desperate to secure. The chapter's most liberating move is to reframe what the anxious person has been taught to see as a character flaw. The heightened sensitivity, the emotional intensity, the deep need for closeness, these are not immaturity or weakness. They are the natural output of an attachment system calibrated toward connection, and in the right relationship, with a partner who provides steady reassurance, that same sensitivity becomes attunement, warmth, and devotion. The problem is almost never that the anxious person needs too much in an absolute sense. It is that they have too often chosen partners structurally unable to meet those needs, and then blamed themselves for the resulting distress. The path forward the author's sketch centers on reshaping the anxious person's attachment working model. The internal set of expectations about whether closeness is safe and whether they are worthy of love. This is not achieved by suppressing needs or pretending to be more self-sufficient, which only deepens the wound, but by recognizing activating strategies and protest behavior as they arise. By learning to distinguish a genuine problem from an attachment system false alarm, and above all, by choosing a partner who can actually provide a secure base. The anxious person who partners with someone secure often finds their alarms quieting on their own, not because they changed who they are, but because the danger they were forever scanning for finally stopped appearing. Chapter 6. Keeping Love at Arm's Length, the Avoidant Attachment Style. The avoidant style is, in a sense, the mirror image, and the authors are careful to establish first that the avoidant attachment machinery is fully in place beneath the surface. Avoidant people are not free of the need for closeness. They have simply developed an elaborate apparatus for suppressing it. That apparatus the authors call deactivating strategies, any behavior or thought used to squelch intimacy and shut down the attachment system. The list they provide is precise and recognizable, saying you are not ready to commit while staying in a relationship for years, focusing on a partner's small imperfections, pulling away when things are going well, forming relationships with an impossible future, keeping secrets and being vague to maintain independence, avoiding physical closeness and not saying I love you even while feeling it. 2 deactivating strategies get chapters within the chapter because they are so powerful. The first is the Phantom X, the idealized former partner an avoidant person pines after, whose imagined perfection makes every real, present partner feel inadequate. The Phantom X is not really about the X at all. It functions as a deactivating strategy, a way of keeping a safe emotional distance from the person actually in front of you by comparing them to someone who exists only in memory. The second is the power of the one, the belief that somewhere out there is a person with whom connection will be effortless and total, so that the ordinary friction of a real relationship becomes proof that this cannot be the right person after all. Both fantasies serve the same function. They justify keeping the attachment system switched off. The authors also dismantle the avoidant person's proudest self-image with a single distinction: the difference between self-reliance and genuine independence. Avoidant people tend to prize self-reliance as strength, but the authors argue it is often a trap. Studies show a strong belief in self-reliance correlates with avoidance, and the cost is real. Mistaking self-reliance for independence, the avoidant person diminishes the value of receiving support and ends up more isolated and, paradoxically, less free than the securely attached person who can lean on others. The self in self-reliance is the problem. It forces a person to carry alone what was never meant to be carried alone. What makes the avoidant portrait poignant, rather than merely critical, is the author's insistence that the underlying need remains. The avoidant person feels the same pull toward connection as anyone else. They have simply learned to interpret that pull as a threat to their autonomy and to reach for a deactivating strategy the moment it appears. Change, for the avoidant person, means learning to notice these strategies in the act, to catch themselves fixating on a flaw or summoning the phantom X at exactly the moment closeness deepens, and to recognize the fantasy of effortless love and total self-sufficiency for the defenses they are. The reward is the possibility of a real bond with a real person, which no idealized memory can offer. Chapter 7. Getting Comfortably Close. The Secure Attachment Style. Writing about secure people, the authors admit, almost seems like a boring task. If you are secure, closeness simply is not a problem, and there is a temptation to think there is nothing to say. But the secure style turns out to be the quiet key to the whole book, both as the goal insecure people are working toward and as a resource in its own right. Secure people are comfortable with intimacy, warm and attuned to their partners, reliable in providing reassurance, and untroubled by the small threats that send anxious partners into protest and avoidant partners into retreat. They are not perfect or conflict-free. They are simply operating from an internal assumption that closeness is safe and that they and their partner are worthy of love. The chapter's most striking finding is what the authors call the secure buffering effect. Secure individuals report higher relationship satisfaction, closeness, and commitment, and these tend to grow over time, while insecure individuals report all three declining. But the crucial discovery emerged when researchers looked at mixed couples. One secure partner, one insecure. Secure couples functioned better than insecure couples, as expected. The surprise was that mixed couples showed no measurable disadvantage relative to fully secure ones. A single secure partner, in other words, can raise an insecure partner's satisfaction, and functioning up toward the secure level, nurturing the insecure partner into a more secure stance over time. Security is contagious in the best way. What produces this effect, the authors explain, is a cluster of concrete secure behaviors rather than any magic. Secure people are not preoccupied with keeping score or protecting their independence, so they can respond generously to a partner's needs without feeling diminished. They do not take a partner's bad mood as evidence of impending abandonment or as a personal attack. They can offer support without being destabilized. They communicate directly about problems instead of playing games, and they assume good intentions unless given real reason not to. Each of these is a habit that a formerly insecure person can learn, which is exactly why the authors hold secure functioning up as a teachable model and not merely an accident of fortunate childhood. The deeper point running beneath this chapter is that becoming more secure is not about eliminating needs or achieving self-sufficiency. The very ideals the book has been arguing against. It is about coming to trust that closeness is safe and that one's needs are legitimate, and then acting from that trust. Insecure readers are invited to study secure people not with envy, but as apprentices, learning the specific moves, the generosity, the directness, the refusal to catastrophize, that add up to a secure way of loving. and those already secure are encouraged to see the enormous, life-altering gift they represent to an insecure partner. Chapter 8. The Anxious-Avoidant Trap. Having drawn each style in full, the authors turn to the pairing that produces the most suffering. The anxious person and the avoidant person lock together. It is called a trap because you fall into it with no awareness of what is happening, and because the two styles fit together like a lock and a key that slowly destroy each other. The anxious partner needs closeness and reassurance. The avoidant partner needs distance and independence. Every time the anxious partner pursues, the avoidant partner distances to protect their autonomy, which spikes the anxious partner's alarm and triggers more pursuit, which drives more distancing. A vicious cycle in which each person's attachment strategy directly reinforces the other's. The authors catalogue the characteristic features of this dynamic with clinical specificity. There is the roller coaster effect, in which the relationship never runs on an even keel but swings between highs and lows. There is the emotional counterbalancing act, in which the avoidant partner inflates their need for distance in proportion to the anxious partner's need for closeness. There is stable instability, in which the relationship endures for years precisely because the tension never resolves. There is the recurring, bewildered sense that the couple is always fighting about the same underlying thing without ever naming it. And there is the experience the authors call life in the inner circle as the enemy, in which the anxious partner finds that the closer they get, the more the avoidant partner treats intimacy itself as the threat. What makes the trap so durable is that the intermittent reinforcement, the unpredictable alternation of affection and withdrawal, is psychologically addictive, producing exactly the kind of highs and lows that keep the anxious partner hooked while never delivering the steady security they actually need. The anxious partner mistakes the intensity of the roller coaster for the depth of love. The avoidant partner, meanwhile, experiences the relationship as a constant low-grade siege on their independence and keeps generating areas of contention as a way of manufacturing the distance their system craves. Both are miserable, and both, tragically, may believe the misery is proof of how much the relationship matters. The author's purpose here is diagnostic and cautionary. They want the reader to recognize the pattern clearly enough to understand its emotional price. The chronic disquiet, the stunted growth, the physical toll of a partner who cannot serve as a secure base. This is the big warning sign the book has been building toward. Seeing the trap for what it is does not by itself dissolve it, but it converts a baffling, self-blaming private torment into a recognizable structure with known dynamics, which is the necessary first step toward either repairing the bond or having the clarity to leave it. Chapter 9. Escaping the Anxious-Avoidant Trap. Recognition is not release, and this chapter addresses the reader who sees the trap plainly yet cannot simply climb out. The authors are honest that an anxious-avoidant relationship carries built-in discrepancies that will not vanish. The two partners genuinely want different amounts of closeness, and no amount of insight erases that. What insight can do is change how the couple manages the difference, moving the relationship toward greater security even if it never becomes a fully secure pairing. The path they outline begins with each partner understanding their own attachment role and its effect on the other. The anxious partner learns to recognize activating strategies and protest behavior as they surface and to communicate the underlying need directly, rather than through scorekeeping or threats. The avoidant partner learns to notice their deactivating strategies, the fault-finding, the sudden urge for distance, the phantom X summoned at the moment of closeness, and to understand that these are defenses rather than truths about the relationship. Both come to see that the other's behavior is not a personal rejection or an intolerable demand, but the predictable output of an attachment system. Central to the repair is the discipline of not reinforcing the other's insecurity. The avoidant partner who can offer reassurance, even when their instinct is to withdraw, interrupts the cycle at its source, because much of the anxious partner's protest behavior is downstream of unmet reassurance. The anxious partner who can regulate their own alarm and give the avoidant partner room, rather than escalating pursuit, removes the pressure that triggers deactivation. The authors are realistic that this is asymmetrical work requiring genuine effort from both, and that the recurring discrepancies will always be present to some degree. But they hold out the real possibility of a workable, warmer bond. Underneath the tactics lies the same conviction that animates the whole book, that the reassurance the anxious partner seeks is not excessive neediness, and the space the avoidant partner seeks is not coldness, but that both, met wisely, allow each person to become more secure. The couple that succeeds does not eliminate their differences, they stop weaponizing them. The chapter is, in the end, a hopeful counterweight to the previous one. The trap is real and costly, but it is not always a life sentence, provided both partners are willing to do the work with clear eyes. Chapter 10. When Abnormal Becomes the Norm, an attachment guide to breaking up. Sometimes the wise choice is to leave, and the authors give that choice its own careful treatment, because leaving an anxious-avoidant bond is uniquely hard. The very intermittency that made the relationship painful also made it addictive, and the anxious person in particular has grown so accustomed to a baseline of disquiet that a chaotic, insecure attachment can feel normal. Abnormal has become the norm. Breaking up, therefore, means not only ending a relationship, but going through a kind of withdrawal from the roller coaster itself. The authors offer concrete guidance for surviving that withdrawal, and it is practical rather than sentimental. They advise finding a comforting, supportive place to stay in the first difficult nights and getting attachment needs met in other ways by recruiting friends and family as a temporary secure base. They urge the reader not to feel ashamed of slipping and going back, and not to feel guilty about the intensity of the pain, because the pain is the predictable result of an attachment system in distress, rather than evidence that the relationship should have continued. They recommend, at the moment when positive memories come flooding in, asking a trusted friend for a reality check, because the mind idealizes what it has lost. One of the most useful interventions the authors describe turns an avoidant defense into a tool for the person doing the leaving. Writing down all the reasons you wanted to leave in the first place, so that when longing and idealization strike, the record is there to counter the distortion. This is a deliberate, clear-eyed act against the attachment system's tendency to rewrite history in favor of reunion. The authors reassure the reader that no matter how consuming the pain feels, it will pass, a promise grounded in their understanding of how the attachment system settles once the intermittent reinforcement is finally removed. The larger message of the chapter is permission. In a culture that treats leaving as failure and staying as virtue, the authors give the reader who has honestly tried and found the relationship unworkable a framework for understanding why letting go is not weakness. Choosing to leave a partner who cannot serve as a secure base and enduring the withdrawal that follows is presented as an act of self-respect and a step toward the secure connection the person actually deserves. The point is never to break up lightly, but to break free of the illusion that a painful attachment is the same thing as a deep one. Chapter 11. Effective Communication, Getting the Message Across. The final movement of the book hands over the skills, and the first is the one the authors return to again and again. Effective communication. This is the single practice that secure people use naturally and that insecure people can learn deliberately. Its premise is that we all have legitimate needs in relationships, that there is nothing shameful in them, and that the way to a good relationship is to state those needs early, directly, and without apology, and then to watch carefully how the other person responds. The authors present effective communication as serving two goals. The first is choosing the right partner. Because a person's response to a clearly stated need is enormously revealing, effective communication is the fastest, most reliable way to find out early whether someone can meet your needs, before you have invested months of hope. A secure partner responds to a well-expressed need with concern and a genuine attempt to help. An avoidant partner recoils or deflects. And either way, the authors note, you win because you have learned something true about the person while there is still time to act on it. The second goal is ensuring your needs are met within an existing relationship, turning silent resentment or manipulative protest behavior into honest, workable requests. The chapter is specific about what effective communication actually looks like, because just communicate is useless without technique. The authors teach the reader to focus on their own needs and to get them across plainly rather than hinting. To be specific rather than speaking in vague generalities a partner cannot act on. Never to blame or make the partner feel selfish, incompetent, or defective. And to be assertive and non-apologetic, because relationship needs are valid and do not require justification. Stated this way, a need becomes an invitation to intimacy rather than an accusation. The authors are also honest about why this simple-sounding tool is hard to adopt. It requires vulnerability. Exposing a need means risking rebuff. And both anxious and avoidant styles have deeply ingrained reasons to avoid that exposure. The anxious person fears the need will drive the partner away. The avoidant person is uncomfortable admitting a need at all. Yet the authors report that everyone they have known who adopted effective communication was grateful for it, often experiencing enormous relief the moment their real needs were finally on the table. Effective communication does not guarantee that every problem gets solved, but it guarantees that you learn where you actually stand, which is the precondition for every good decision that follows. Chapter 12. Working Things Out. 5 Secure Principles for Dealing with Conflict. The book closes with conflict because how a couple fights determines more than almost anything else whether they thrive, and secure people fight in a recognizably different way. The authors distill the secure approach into 5 principles, presenting them as learnable habits rather than innate gifts. The first is to show basic concern for the other person's well-being. Even in the heat of disagreement, secure people keep their partner's needs in view, understanding that ignoring those needs will rebound directly onto their own. The remaining 4 fill out the picture. The second principle is to maintain focus on the problem at hand, rather than letting a specific disagreement metastasize into a referendum on the whole relationship. The third is to refrain from generalizing the conflict, resisting the pull toward "you always" and "you never," which turns a solvable issue into an unwinnable indictment. The fourth is to remain willing to engage rather than stonewalling or fleeing, staying in the conversation even when it is uncomfortable. The fifth returns to the tool of the previous chapter, to effectively communicate feelings and needs, keeping the exchange honest and specific rather than defensive or vague. What unites these principles, the authors emphasize, is that secure people do not experience conflict as a threat to the bond itself. Because their underlying assumption is that the relationship is safe, a fight is simply a problem to be worked out between 2 people who remain fundamentally on the same side, not a sign that the whole thing is collapsing. This is why they can afford to stay concerned for the partner, stay focused, stay engaged. The security frees them to fight well. Insecure partners, by contrast, tend to experience every conflict as an existential emergency, which is precisely what makes conflict so destructive for them. The encouraging conclusion is that these principles can be practiced by anyone, regardless of their starting style, and that doing so has a self-reinforcing effect. Approaching conflict with concern and directness tends to elicit the same in return, and over time to build exactly the sense of safety that makes future conflicts easier. The secure buffering effect operating at the level of individual arguments. Even the small biological mechanics support this. The authors note that repairing conflict and staying close preserves the oxytocin bond that makes partners more agreeable to one another, while prolonged discord strips it away. Fighting well, in other words, is not merely good manners. It is how a couple keeps its physiological and emotional bond intact. What to carry forward? Taken as a whole, Attached makes a claim that runs directly against the grain of a culture that prizes self-sufficiency above nearly everything. That the human person is not built to stand alone, that dependence on the right other is not weakness, but the very ground of strength, and that the reassurance we seek from those we love is written into us at a level deeper than choice. The dependency paradox, that we become most fully ourselves, most daring and most free, precisely when we can rely on another completely, is not merely a finding about relationships. It is a quiet correction to the modern picture of the sovereign individual who owes nothing and needs no one, and it points toward a truth about persons that the science here only begins to touch. That we are made for communion, and that our restlessness apart from it is not a defect to be medicated away, but a signal pointing us toward what we are for. The anxious person's hunger and the avoidant person's flight are, seen rightly, 2 disordered responses to the same real and good need. And the secure person's ease is a kind of health, a soul at rest in the trust that closeness is safe. What the reader carries forward is both a diagnostic gift and a practical hope. The diagnostic gift is the ability to see, in oneself and in others, the patterns that once looked like mysterious personal failings, to name the activating strategies, the deactivating strategies, the protest behavior, the phantom X, the trap, and in naming them, to stop blaming oneself for wounds that have a structure and a remedy. The practical hope is that these patterns are not destiny, that one can choose a partner who provides a secure base, learn the secure habits of directness and generosity and steady reassurance, and grow toward security even if one did not begin there. That security, the authors show, is contagious. A single secure partner can nurture a whole relationship toward health. This is a book worth reading in full, both for the depth of its examples and for the way it hands the reader tools rather than mere insight, and for the older wisdom it recovers almost without meaning to, that to love well is to depend well, and that the freedom we most want is found not in needing no one, but in having found someone worth needing.